The rain had been falling since morning, coating the streets in a silver shimmer that reflected the neon signs of downtown. Ethan Cole watched through the large glass window of his restaurant, the Ember Room, as water streamed down in endless rivulets. Inside, everything was warm and golden, the clink of glasses, the murmur of expensive laughter, the scent of truffle and rosemary. Outside, the city seemed like another world entirely. He had built this empire with nothing but ambition and grit. People called him a visionary, a self-made man who turned a forgotten diner into one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. And yet, sometimes, when he stood by that window at closing time, a strange emptiness crept into him, a feeling that success had taken more than it had given. It was close to midnight when he decided to step out for some air. The staff had gone home, and the kitchen was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerators. He slipped on his coat and stepped into the drizzle, inhaling the scent of wet pavement and gasoline. That was when he saw him. The boy couldn't have been more than 12 or 13, a small figure hunched beside the dumpster behind the restaurant. He was soaked to the bone, his shoes caked with mud, his thin fingers clutching an old, torn backpack. Every few seconds, he lifted his head to look at the light streaming from the restaurant's windows, eyes wide and hungry, not just for food, but for warmth. Ethan's first instinct was to turn away. He'd seen this before, kids hanging around back doors, hoping for scraps. Usually, the kitchen staff handled it. But tonight, something made him stop. Maybe it was the way the boy was standing, not begging, not scavenging, just waiting. He stepped closer. "Hey," Ethan said softly. The boy startled, spinning around. His face was pale and thin, framed by dripping hair that stuck to his forehead. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, his voice trembling. "I wasn't stealing anything, I swear. I didn't say you were." Ethan tucked his hands into his pockets, studying him. "What are you doing out here this late?" The boy hesitated, glancing down. "Just looking. It smells nice in there." Ethan looked toward the restaurant, then back at the boy. His clothes were ragged, the knees of his jeans torn, his jacket a size too big and soaked through. He had the look of someone who'd been cold for a long time. "You hungry?" Ethan asked. The boy lifted his head. There was a flicker of hope in his eyes, but he didn't move. "Yeah," he whispered, "but not just for me." Ethan frowned slightly. "Not just for you." The boy's hands tightened around the straps of his backpack. "My mom's waiting, over there." He pointed toward the edge of the alley, where the streetlight barely reached. "She said I should see if anyone would give me something. She didn't want to come herself." The words landed heavier than Ethan expected. He followed the boy's gesture, squinting through the rain, but saw only shadows. "Your mom's out there." The boy nodded. "She's tired. We've been walking all day." Something in his voice, the quiet exhaustion, the thread of responsibility far too heavy for a child, hit Ethan in a place he didn't like to acknowledge. He had grown up not far from this kind of life, in a town where dinner wasn't always guaranteed. But he'd buried that memory long ago beneath fine suits and Michelin stars. "What's your name?" Ethan asked. "Jamie," the boy said. "Well, Jamie," Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Come on. You and your mom can't stay out here." Jamie's eyes widened. "You mean, inside?" "Inside," Ethan confirmed. "You can warm up. Get something to eat." Jamie hesitated, glancing back toward the shadows where his mother waited. "She won't believe me," he said quietly. "Nobody ever lets us in." Ethan felt something twist in his chest. "Then let's prove her wrong." Jamie gave him a cautious look, then disappeared into the darkness of the alley. A few moments later, he returned, holding a woman's hand. She was wrapped in an old coat, her hair damp and tangled, her posture weary but graceful. When she stepped into the light spilling from the restaurant's doorway, Ethan noticed her eyes, tired but proud, the kind that met his gaze without flinching. As he opened the door for them, warmth and the faint scent of vanilla and butter spilled out into the cold night. Jamie looked around in awe, his mouth slightly open, while his mother murmured a quiet thank you. Ethan didn't know what made him do it, maybe guilt, maybe instinct, but he smiled and said, "Let's get you both something hot." And as they stepped into the golden light of his restaurant, he couldn't shake the feeling that this small, rain-soaked encounter was about to change far more than he expected. The moment they crossed the threshold, the warmth hit them like a soft wave. The restaurant was closed to customers, the lights dimmed to a golden glow, jazz humming quietly from the speakers. The polished tables gleamed, and the scent of butter and roasted garlic still lingered in the air. Jamie clung to his mother's hand, his wide eyes darting from the chandeliers to the plush booths, as if he had stepped into another world. Ethan guided them to a table by the window, the one he usually reserved for investors or special guests. It felt strange, almost rebellious, to seat them there. He grabbed a couple of menus from the host's stand out of habit before realizing they didn't matter. "You don't need to look at these," he said, setting them aside. "Just tell me what you'd like." Jamie's mother hesitated. "That's very kind, but..." "No, but," Ethan interrupted gently. "You're my guests." She studied him for a moment before nodding. Her movements were careful, measured, like someone who had learned not to expect kindness. Her hands, though rough from work and weather, were elegant. She smoothed the tablecloth, then whispered to Jamie, "Say thank you." Jamie grinned. "Thank you, sir." Ethan smiled despite himself. "You're welcome." He disappeared into the kitchen, rolling up his sleeves. He hadn't cooked for anyone personally in months. The head chef usually ran the line now. But something in him itched to do it himself, to make something, not just own it. He found leftover steak, mashed potatoes, a few vegetables, and began to work. The rhythm came back easily. The sizzle of the pan, the smell of butter hitting hot metal, the motion of seasoning and plating. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't thinking about reviews or profits, just the simple act of feeding someone who needed it. When he returned to the dining room with 2 steaming plates, Jamie's eyes lit up so brightly it almost made Ethan laugh. "This is for us?" the boy asked, his voice trembling between disbelief and joy. "All yours," Ethan said, setting the plates down. "Careful, it's hot." Jamie dug in instantly, making small, eager sounds of approval. His mother took slower bites, chewing thoughtfully, as though she wanted to remember every flavor. Ethan leaned against a nearby table, arms folded, just watching them. After a few minutes, she looked up. "This is incredible," she said quietly. "It's been a long time since we've had something warm." "I'm glad," Ethan replied. "I'm Ethan, by the way." She gave a small, tired smile. "Lily." The name hit him with a faint, electric jolt. He blinked. "Lily." She paused mid-bite. "Yes. Why?" For a moment, he was silent. There were 1,000 lilies in the world, but something about her eyes, hazel, flecked with gold, felt achingly familiar. He remembered a girl standing beside a train platform years ago, waving as he left town with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. The memory had faded over the years, smothered by ambition. But now, in the flickering light of his own restaurant, it all came rushing back. He studied her face more closely. Beneath the exhaustion, beneath the rough edges of hardship, he could still see her. The same Lily who had believed in him when no one else did. "Lily," he said slowly, his voice barely more than a whisper. "You used to live in Brookvale, right?" Her fork froze in midair. She looked up sharply. "Yes. How do you?" "Ethan," he said. "Ethan Cole." Her breath caught. "Ethan." Jamie looked between them, confused, a bit of potato on his chin. "You two know each other?" Neither of them answered right away. Lily set her fork down, her eyes searching his face. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," she said softly. "I didn't think I'd see you," Ethan replied, his throat tight. "You disappeared." Her gaze dropped to the table. "Life doesn't always go the way we plan." He wanted to ask her 100 questions. What had happened, where she'd gone, why she'd never reached out, but the look on her face silenced him. There was too much history between them, too many years carved out by loss and pride. Instead, he gestured toward Jamie. "He's yours." Her eyes softened as she looked at her son. "Yes, he's my reason for everything." Jamie smiled up at her, his mouth still full. "Mom's the best," he said proudly. Ethan felt something twist in his chest again. He had everything. Restaurants, wealth, a name that opened doors. But looking at the two of them, sitting together over a simple meal, he realized he had never had what they shared, a bond built from love, not circumstance. They talked for a while after that. Lily told him bits and pieces. How she'd married, how her husband had passed suddenly, how she'd struggled to keep up with bills until there was nowhere left to go. Ethan listened in silence, feeling the sharp sting of guilt that he had once walked away from the girl who had believed in him most. When the plates were empty and Jamie began to nod sleepily against his mother's arm, Ethan said quietly, "You don't have to go back out there tonight. I'll have someone set up the guest room upstairs. Just for the night." Lily looked at him, wary but grateful. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he said. "But I want to." As she finally nodded, a faint smile touching her lips, Ethan realized something had shifted deep inside him. For the first time in years, the restaurant didn't feel like a monument to his success. It felt like a place where something real might begin again. The next morning, the city woke under a soft mist, the streets still glistening from last night's rain. Ethan stood in his office upstairs, a cup of untouched coffee cooling beside him. He'd barely slept. The events of the night before kept replaying in his mind. The boy's wide-eyed wonder, Lily's quiet gratitude, the look of surprise when she realized who he was. He'd seen countless faces pass through his life, but none had left a mark like hers. He glanced through the glass wall that overlooked the restaurant below. It was early, the staff not yet in, but the faint hum of morning preparation had already begun. Then he saw them. Lily and Jamie sat at a corner table, the boy eating breakfast, his mother looking out the window as sunlight filtered through. She wore one of the restaurant's spare sweaters he'd found for her hair tied back neatly. For a fleeting moment, she looked peaceful, almost as she had years ago when they were young. Ethan went down quietly, not wanting to disturb them. When he reached their table, Jamie looked up and beamed. "Mr. Ethan." The chef made pancakes. "Real ones." Ethan smiled. "I'm glad you like them." He turned to Lily. "Did you sleep all right?" She nodded. "Better than I have in months. Thank you." There was sincerity in her voice, but also something careful, like she didn't want to owe him too much. He understood that look. He had seen it before in people who had lost control of their own fate. "Listen," Ethan said after a pause. "I've been thinking." Lily raised an eyebrow. "About what?" He hesitated, choosing his words. "About how you and Jamie can't just go back out there. You said last night you've been trying to find steady work." "I was," she admitted, "cleaning houses when I could. But it's hard with Jamie. I can't leave him alone, and shelters don't take kids during the day." She gave a small, resigned smile. "I'll figure something out. We always do." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "What if you didn't have to? What if you both stayed here for a while?" Lily blinked, startled. "Stay here?" He nodded. "There's a small apartment above the restaurant. It used to belong to my sous chef before he moved. You could use it for now. And, if you want, I could use some help downstairs. Someone who keeps things organized, handles guests, makes sure everything feels like home. You've always had a gift for that." For a long moment, she said nothing. Jamie stopped eating, sensing the change in tone. "Mom," he whispered. Lily looked from Ethan to her son, her expression unreadable. "I can't accept charity, Ethan." "It's not charity," he said gently. "It's an offer. A job. A home." Her eyes glistened for a moment, and she looked down, running her fingers over the edge of her coffee cup. "You always did have a way of making impossible things sound easy," she murmured. "But are you sure? You don't even know what's happened to me. You don't know who I am anymore." "I know enough," he said softly. "I know who you were, and I see who you still are. That's enough for me." Silence lingered between them, broken only by the clatter of dishes in the distance. Then Jamie's small voice cut through, hopeful and uncertain. "Does that mean we could stay here? Like, really stay?" Ethan looked at him and smiled. "Yes, Jamie, really stay." The boy grinned so wide it was contagious, but Lily still hesitated. "Ethan, I don't want this to be out of guilt or some old memory. You don't owe me anything." He took a breath, meeting her gaze steadily. "I'm not doing it because I owe you. I'm doing it because it feels right. Maybe for the first time in a long time." She studied him, searching for the man she once knew beneath the polished exterior of success. The fire was still there, ambitious, driven, but softer now, tempered by years of loneliness. Finally, she nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "All right, we'll stay. For now." Relief washed over him. He hadn't realized until that moment how much he'd wanted her to say yes. He extended his hand, and after a pause, she took it. Her touch was warm and real, grounding him in a way nothing else had in years. Jamie jumped up from his chair. "Mom, does that mean we live here now?" Lily laughed, a sound Ethan hadn't heard since they were young. "Looks like it," she said, ruffling his hair. The boy turned to Ethan. "Then I can help too. I can wash dishes or sweep floors." Ethan chuckled. "We'll see about that. For now, just eat your pancakes." As they finished breakfast, the sunlight grew stronger, spilling golden light across the tables. The restaurant, once just a symbol of success, felt different now, alive again. Ethan watched Lily help Jamie wipe syrup from his chin, her laughter soft but real, and he felt something stir in his chest that no award or profit margin had ever given him. When they stood to leave, Lily turned back to him, her eyes gentle but strong. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing us, for not looking away." Ethan shook his head. "No, Lily, thank you, for reminding me why I built this place in the first place." And as she led Jamie upstairs to the small apartment that would now be their home, Ethan stood in the quiet restaurant, the faint scent of pancakes still in the air, and realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about business or money. He was thinking about beginnings, and how sometimes, they arrive looking nothing like what we expect, but everything like what we need.